Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds, hanging out with these nerds.
Nathan Nerdarch.
Nerdarchy is Ted.
And today we have a Game Master tip for you, how not to be the worst GM. Hey guys, you may have noticed these awesome gaming shirts we're wearing from ArmorClass10.com. Don't dress like an NPC. Down in the description below, you can find a link to ArmorClass10.com where you can get your own awesome gaming shirt. So with that, we're going into a Game Master tips. Worst things that have been done in a game by a DM, pretty much.
And today, we're actually going to go into the worst things that we've done as a DM.
Now, so Ted likes bringing this up a lot in our videos. and you know, that early on in our gaming history that I was kind of an adversarial GM. And I feel like, too, like, I come from a generation where that was kind of like the thing.
That was the norm.
Yeah, like, it's like you against them within these weird, confined, like, rules that the DM's supposed to amorphously follow.
Even though you could crush them at any moment.
Yeah, pretty much. So I would do things like that I actually go out of my way to countermand when I game now. And the biggest way I was kind of like an adversarial GM was information that would be common to the player character, I wouldn't present to them and I wouldn't remind the players. And here's what happens, right? It's been a week since the last time you gamed. It's been a month since the last time you gamed. Whatever. You're busy. You have lives going on outside of the fantasy world. Other things come into your mind. Us as players, we are not in the game. We are not experiencing the world. We have not grown up in that world. We don't live it. There's no way for the player to know what the character actually knows. Even the stupidest character in the game with an intelligence dump stat knows more about that world and has a better feeling or assessment for it than we do, even if we're way smarter than the character we're playing. Right. Just because they're experiencing. So a primary example was one of the early character deaths for Nerdarchy Ryan. Maybe even the first. He was playing a Minotaur, and he had this run-in with a wall that he kept like bashing his head against and took a bunch of damage to himself before he realized he couldn't break through it. And then they moved on, and it'd been days since that happened.
No, and we had access to some kind of healing if we would have thought about it. But we weren't in a situation where we were recording our hit points or we were aware of our hit points. Dave did that. And it got to the point.
Well, in my defense, they could have recorded their hit points. But I as the GM, I always kept track. Nowadays, I never do that. I'm like, guys, you keep track. Tell me when you're dead. But back then, I did record it, and I always knew how many they had. Well, then they went into an encounter, and their meat wall, their tank, was down a significant amount of his hit points. He never healed. They never rested. And, things are happening. Attacks are happening. And then all of a sudden, Ryan's like, I'm going to do such and such. And I'm like, no, you're dead. And it was very much in the vein of,
dun, dun, dun.
Like, at any point, I could have, like, hey, you're down hit points. Or, hey, guys, you look at your Minotaur, and he's got huge knots on his head and bruises and stuff. But I didn't do that. Instead, as a DM, I'm like, hey, it's not my job for them to pay attention. It's up to them. And it's a very kind of like gotcha kind of thing. Mm-hmm. That was kind of dickish back in the day. And it cost that character's life. And now, I try and avoid those so much so that, like, in one of the more recent games that I'm running, the Scarlet Sisterhood, I kept bringing up the fact that they never explored the mansion. Now, they probably think that I have the mansion all planned out, and I'm trying to push them into the next part of the venture. But it's not true in any way, because it's not there until they go there.
It's an empty blank space that says this guy's place.
Yeah. But I just felt it odd when they were listing, the stuff that they could do that wasn't on the list.
Mm-hmm. And loot the guy's place should be up on the list.
Yeah, because they're usually very much about looting the guy's place, throughout this game. Even if the guy's not like the enemy, they're like breaking into his place or whatever.
Yeah, but like a storyteller or a writer, you as a reader, you're reading this and you're like, wait a minute, this guy's mentioned this like 5 times. There's got to be something here.
Right. And if they go there might be. If they don't, there might be, but it doesn't involve them, so it doesn't matter that much. But that's definitely an instance where I've been able to grow as a GM and get better. And I really try and take into account that the characters know more than the players do. And I feel like it's part of my job as a GM to try and fill in those blanks for them and give them that information so when they're making decisions, they can make good decisions. Or at least informed decisions anyway. because they're players. They're not going to make good decisions. They're going to do the craziest, wonkiest things you could ever expect.
When it comes to decisions, one of the things that this game is known for is decisions based off of dice rolling, and every once in a while, like even though I know in my in my core that it's a bad move, there's times that I'll call for a dice roll here because someone is doing something, rather than just they did what I want them to do. Narrate what happens. And it actually happened just recently in one of my games. It was I think 2 sessions back. Ryan went to investigate something, and I had him make an investigate roll when I had planned that this is what I know. At least 3 of the characters in the group, someone was going to check this thing, rather than me even saying it was there. Ryan took the agency and said it was, and I'm like, awesome, this is great. And then before I knew it, I'm like, make a roll. Well, this was the link to the next part of the story. If he failed, then what would I have done?
It's like, oh no, well, am I going to get
What
to
have
there?
I done? That brings up a good point. That's like the DM natural twitch, make a roll, right? And sometimes you really don't need to make the roll. If it's ever anything you want to happen in a game, for the love of God, do not require a roll, because the dice gods will F you every time. They're like, I've been waiting for this moment all along. Natural 1, unless he's a halfling, it'll
And
be
it's
a 2.
Ted just struggled with listening to dice rolling addiction. He
Yeah.
just got to make the noise.
So like
From now on, right, you just got to upend it with make a die roll. It doesn't matter, but make a roll. Has nothing to do with what we're talking about now.
I just want to hear the sound of the die, really. But like I
Maybe you need a Nerdarchy dice app where you hit the button and it makes the
It's like-
sound of rolling dice.
that would be neat.
So on my end, this happened recently as well, and it's every once in a while I make this mistake of when I have a player. I had a new player. It was a new group, and they're all kind of like into it. And this person had never played D&D before, and she's playing a halfling, and she's like, I'm gonna climb on top of this Nothic and stab it in the eye. And I'm like, that sounds really ridiculous. I don't know if you could actually do that as a halfling. Like, so I'm going through all the math and physics of this when we're playing a game of fantasy and magic. So what I took away that person's, I stepped on that person's creativity and agency, when I could have easily just said, yeah, that's a cool way to attack, and made it a regular attack, even though it was all descriptive, had it be described, and everything was cool.
Well, you know what, too? I feel like that's a great place where, as a GM, you're not sure, where you go make a roll. Because you don't care if they fail that roll, and then you can have consequences for that fail. Or if they super succeed that roll, you can have something cool happen. That, like, when you want something to absolutely happen in your game, never freaking ask for the die roll. If you're not sure, ask for a die roll and determine what happens based on the die is going to tell you if that's how feasible that is. They roll a 1. Yeah, it sounded like a great idea, but you just accidentally teabagged yourself from the Nothic. Or, yeah, you totally run up its back, ninja style, flip over, stab it in its eye, and land in front of it, making like a cool pose or something.
So like I wound up having a similar instance in one of the fan games that I ran.
And this is funny because we were talking about this game before it happened, and Ted's like, yeah, I'm gonna do this and this, and I go, well, what about this? He goes, I don't know, that's not gonna happen. And then I'm like, well, what about this? And I made him talk out some things.
So
But here's one of the things we didn't talk about.
We didn't talk about this, so I wasn't prepared. But the idea was they were in a cursed building, but I let them approach it rather than just start out at it. And the one character's like, well, I'm going to sleep outside. And I'm like, but the adventure's inside. Like, this is what I'm thinking. I'm like, the adventure's inside. If you just stay outside, you're going to miss the whole thing, and then you're going to have lost the opportunity to do this adventure. So, like, I basically was like, well, it got cold, so you decided to sleep inside. And the player really ran with it. But, had I been a little bit more prepared and thinking on my feet, David come up with like, oh, well, you could have done this or you could have done that. To force them.
No, you're padding this one a little bit. You literally said, "I'm pulling the GM card. You have to stay in the end."
Oh, did I really?
It was bad. It was real bad.
Man,
I cringed.
It was turn away.
Nerdarchy never gives this advice.
Oh man, I guess I must have blanked that apparently really...
He washed it away from his
But
memory.
you know what? Here's like a tip to add to that, right? With something like that, nothing's going to happen right away. So you have time as the GM. If you just say yes, you have time to think about it a little bit and figure something out.
He'd be like, okay, you fall asleep. And then you're like, getting a little bit more time to
Oh, now you wake up in the end. You don't know how you got there.
Right.
It's a
Yeah.
mystery.
Or maybe the grounds are also cursed.
Yeah.
So I made a really, really bad move there, and it's something that Dave likes to grind into me. Oh, you screwed up here.
Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. One, I just like the F of 10. No, I know, honestly, it doesn't matter how long you've been playing this game or doing anything for that matter. You can easily make mistakes. As the GM, you're in the hot seat. You've got 5, 4, 6 other people looking at you, maybe 50 people if you're streaming it, watching you, and you're like, oh, I got to do something. This is going to mess with things. And you just make a snap decision. And sometimes they're not going to be right, and sometimes you're going to mess up. But that's okay, because it comes back to another thing that we always say: this is just a freaking game.
And while it's just a game, it's also every time you do it, you're going to learn something, and you're going to be able to take that little bit and move forward with it. So that the next time someone's like, oh well, I'm going to do this. All right, you're prepared to think a little bit faster on the fly. You're going to be able to do a little bit more to be able to handle those situations.
Yeah, the goal is ultimately to find new ways to screw up and not repeat the old ways you screwed up as well.
I'm learning from mistakes. I just make new ones. I don't make the old ones anymore.
So another thing that can wind up coming up, and it's a really bad move to do, and that's to issue the railroad. Now, in my early days of DMing, I presented, well, this is my story. I'm only going to run with every single character at the table. If you don't show up, or if somebody doesn't show up, I'm not running. And, I'm only going to present my story. There's no sidelines. There's no going off track. And I quickly, learned not to do this, because you get better stories. You get more involved stories if you move away from just this, I'm writing a novel.
Yeah, I mean that I think we all kind of start out that way. There's certain like bad GM habits that happen that like I feel like everyone does, right? Mm-hmm. The in the beginning, and especially for like us older GMs, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of you guys, if you're just coming into the hobby or you're newer to the hobby, you have the benefit of going on YouTube or going to websites and blogs, and you can really get all this great advice. Or you can come to Nerdarchy and listen to what we have to say. But where we did it, we just kind of did it, and you figured it out as you go. And if you were lucky, you had a subscription to Dragon Magazine or Dungeon Magazine or something like that. But even then, back then, a lot of those guys ran the games the way we did too. So so the hobby really has evolved and come around. The things that I used to do, power gaming, early on was a huge thing. Monty Hall campaigns, it's like, oh, this item's so cool, I want to give it to my players. But you don't think about, like, well, once you do that about 10 times in their third level,
they got a lot of stuff.
It really changes the dynamic of the game. And, obviously the railroading and the idea of, matter of fact, the way the game was even run, it was almost designed like a railroad in the beginning. There was a dungeon. You started at the front door of the dungeon. You kicked in that door, and you proceeded to go until there were no more doors to kick in and monsters to kill and take their stuff. So there's people that would never get away from that style. The storytelling aspect of D&D really did come about more so later.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a very cozy atmosphere to say, well, I know exactly what's going to happen. They're going to go through this stuff. Maybe they'll skip a door. But aside from that, I know what's going on, so you don't have the anxiety of the unknown of what the players are going to do. With not knowing what the players are going to do, I end up, I have in previous games done the railroad. My version of the railroad is I just exclude all other information, and it's like the only party in town is this one thing that's going on. And it's like, oh, I want to go to the blacksmith. Well, okay, you go to the blacksmith, then you do this, and that's it. Like kind of like tamp down all the other interactions, so that's like the shiniest thing.
Oh yeah, so you just gloss
the
over it.
firefly in the night is this one thing that I want them to do.
In that case, it's not so much that you're taking away their agency, but you're glossing over it and making it uninviting and uninteresting.
Yeah,
In a way.
yeah.
Which is good. I mean, taking some time to do some introspect on the way you game can help you improve and keep you from making the worst GM mistakes over and over again and grow. I've always done this thing where I would call up one or two or all my players afterwards. Probably because I like to talk too much for one, and and two, I love talking about D&D, but three, I really want to get their feedback on the game and the session and how they felt about it. I've spent hours on the phone with these guys, talking about D&D, the Monday or Tuesday when I should be like doing work or something, years ago. And talk about the game we had that weekend or whatever.
Absolutely, and I'm right there with it, and that's kind of why we're sitting here talking to you guys, because apparently we haven't gotten it out of our system yet.
Yeah, so we just have to vomit on the internet.
But I mean, I'm the same way. I will ask for feedback, whether it be that night, the following day, or a week down the road. You want to get feedback from your players. You want to make sure that the players are actually happy and enjoying the game, because if not, something's wrong.
Right, and you can use it to grow as a GM. But the real question is, what are the worst GM mistakes you've made in your games? Come on, knock yourself out down in the comments below. While you're at it, like, share, and subscribe.
You can patronize us in a good way over on Patreon.
Don't forget to go to armorclass10.com and get an awesome gaming shirt like these, because you don't want to dress like an NPC.
So until next time,
stay nerdy.
.com, where you can get your own awesome gaming shirt. So with that, we're going into a Game Master Tips. Worst things that have been done in a game by a DM, pretty much.
And today, we're actually going to go into the worst things that we've done as a DM.
Now, so Ted likes bringing this up a lot in our videos. and that early on in our gaming lives going on outside of the fantasy world, other things come into your mind. Us as players, we are not in the game. We are not experiencing the world. We have not grown up in that world. We don't live it. There's no way for the player to know what the character actually knows. Even the stupidest character in the game with an intelligence dump stat knows more about that world and has a better feeling or assess history that I was kind of an adversarial GM. And I feel like, too, like, I come from a generation where that was kind of like the thing.
That was the norm.
Yeah, like, it's like you against them within these weird, confined, like, rules that the DM's supposed to amorphously follow.
Even though you could crush them at any moment.
Yeah, pretty much. So I would do things. Hey, guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds, hanging out with these nerds.
Nate the Nerdarch.
Nerdarch is Ted.
And today we have a Game Master tip for you. How not to be the worst GM. Hey guys, you may have noticed these awesome gaming shirts we're wearing from armorclass10.com. Don't dress like an NPC. Down in the description below, you can find a link to Armor Class 10, that I actually go out of my way to countermand when I game now. And the biggest way I was kind of like an adversarial GM was information that would be common to the player character, I wouldn't present to them and I wouldn't remind the players. And here's what happens, right? It's been a week since the last time you gamed. It's been a month since the last time you gamed. Whatever. You're busy. You have